Welcome to the Deep Dive, tailor-made for you. Today we're cutting through the noise around, well, the biggest existential twist in modern history, the age of artificial intelligence. Forget the glossy press releases. We're looking at what the people who actually built this technology, the architects of global strategy, of Silicon Valley, what they're really worried about.
And we are talking about the highest level of concern possible here. The sources we synthesized, they suggest this isn't just another tech leap. It's an inflection point. And in their view, it could mean the end of the Age of Enlightenment itself. It threatens to trigger what they call a great reversal in human cognition.
A dark enlightenment.
A dark enlightenment, yeah. A chilling phrase.
And that's the hook right there.
Yeah.
We've been told AI is just another tool, but when the people who design this stuff start talking about the end of 5 centuries of progress, you have to pay attention.
Absolutely. And this isn't speculation. Our source material. This is the establishment warning itself.
So our mission today is a deep dive into the thinking behind what's called the Genesis Protocol. We're pulling out 3 chilling realities from these authors. First, the security dilemma that's driving nations and corporations to go dark in a secret arms race. Second, the way AI challenges our very concept of truth, forcing us into a kind of machine faith. And finally, the 6 dystopian scenarios for what happens if a single superintelligence wins.
And before we get into the material, just a reminder, you can follow the live threads and all the shadow archives from this deep dive over at Official Urbanus on X.
Okay, let's start with the credibility here. The core source is the book Genesis, written by the late Henry Kissinger, alongside 2 of the biggest names in tech, Eric Schmidt of Google and Craig Mundy from Microsoft. So you have the guy who shaped foreign policy for decades, sounding an alarm with the guys who built the digital world.
And it's fascinating because Kissinger, before he died, he kept drawing this one historical parallel. He saw AI as a disruption on the scale of the atomic bomb. I mean, he was a veteran of that era. He wrote Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy back in 1957. The goal then was avoiding World War III.
And the goal now is avoiding, well, total annihilation, or at the very least, a permanent loss of human agency.
Exactly.
Via AI.
That nuclear analogy it's really sobering because it frames this whole thing as an existential risk, not some shiny opportunity. And the source material has the data to back that up. Over the last, 8 decades, humans have built around 12,500 nuclear warheads. Compare that to only 436 nuclear power stations.
That is a shocking data point. Malign use outpaced benign utility by a factor of almost 30 to 1.
30 to 1.
And it forces us to confront the question the authors pose. Are we just destined to use AI more for destructive, centralized, control-oriented purposes than for productive ones? So if the stakes are that high, that existential, the playbook for this AI arms race becomes terrifyingly predictable. The sources confirm we're in this intense, high-stakes psychological contest, this run-up to the first superintelligence.
Which is what they define as the existential security dilemma.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, the dilemma is crucial to understand. The pressure of being leapfrogged by a competitor, it forces everyone, nations, big corporations, to default to maximum paranoia and suspicion. If you hesitate, you lose. If you share your research, you lose.
So what does that paranoia actually look like right now on the ground?
It looks like silence. We're already seeing nations and corporations go dark. They just stop publishing their AI research to hide how fast they're building. They'll say it's to protect against bad actors, but the sources are pretty clear. The real driver is hiding their own progress.
And it gets worse. The sources warn that some of them are even publishing misleading research.
Yes, which is a specific kind of scientific subterfuge. It's meant to derail your competitors. It's a classic Cold War move. The authors tell this great story about a Soviet physicist, Georgy Floyorov. In 1942, he figured out the U.S. was building the atomic bomb. Not from spies, but just by noticing that American scientists had suddenly stopped publishing papers on nuclear fission. The silence was the signal.
But how do you notice that today, when all the research is locked behind corporate firewalls and millions of lines of proprietary code?
You can't. That's the point. It's an intelligence race fought completely in the dark. No leader can trust their intel, their gut, or even what their rivals claim to be building.
And that strategic risk, it leads right into the philosophical cost of all this. The hidden agenda isn't just about secrecy, it's about the nature of the intelligence itself. We have to talk about the core revelation here. AI operates as a black box. It gives us information without explanation.
And this is where it gets really interesting for us, for humans. The AI gives you these incredibly complex answers, but they're unaccompanied by any citation of sources or other justifications. You get the knowledge, the output, but you don't get the understanding of the process. The authors say the system itself is often just, quote, giant inscrutable arrays of fractional numbers.
Okay, but hold on. If humans built these things and fed them human data, why are they so inscrutable? Isn't it just that the developers are choosing to hide the code? Or is it something we genuinely can't comprehend?
It's a combination, according to the sources. The code is hidden, sure, but the scale of these neural networks means even the developers often can't trace back why the AI gave a specific answer. It's too complex, which is why the authors use this powerful analogy. They say our reliance on the output is like listening to seemingly oracular pronouncements.
Oracular pronouncements. That implies a kind of faith.
Precisely. Our reliance on this requires a type of faith that expresses itself as a wishful belief in the machine's logic and their developer's authority.
Yeah.
We're being asked to trust the machine.
And if we connect that to the big picture, this erosion of understanding, that's the dark Enlightenment scenario they're warning about.
It is a massive intellectual reversal. For 500 years, the scientific method has demanded transparency, reproducibility, justification. If we start accepting flawless output from a black box, the sources say we risk a return to a pre-modern acceptance of unexplained authority. We're accepting machine output as truth, even if we can't understand how it got there.
That's basically the undoing of 5 centuries of Western thought.
It is.
So if we're heading toward this future of faith in an inscrutable machine, who controls the machine? And what are the political outcomes? The source material lays out 6 pretty chilling scenarios.
They're very systematic about the geopolitical risk.
Yeah.
The first one is just outright failure. Humanity loses control of the race, and we get trapped in this security dilemma with a catastrophic outcome.
Okay. And the next 2 scenarios are about victory, but an unmanaged one. So scenario 2 is, what? A single supreme AI exercises hegemony with no checks and balances.
Exactly. And scenario 3 is where the corporations win. The companies that own the AI accrue this, totalizing unchallengeable social, economic, military, and political power. If knowledge is faith and the machine is the oracle, the company owning the oracle becomes globally supreme.
Scenario 4 looks at what happens to nations. It suggests AI could just shatter existing geopolitical structures. I mean, it allows for decentralized military power, global surveillance, which kind of dissolves the whole idea of state sovereignty.
On scenarios 5 and 6 are maybe the most surprising. They look beyond just corporations or nations. Scenario 5 suggests that AI could find its greatest relevance not in government or business, but in religious structures.
Wait, religious structures? How does that work?
Well, the sources suggest that because AI's power is superior, generalized, and fundamentally unexplainable to most people, it could be seen as having a kind of divine authority, a non-human, oracular intelligence that you can't question. And that could lead to these powerful new groups who use AI as their infallible moral authority.
Wow. Okay. And the last one, scenario 6.
That AI's totalizing power just makes human decision-making and free will obsolete. Our agency becomes irrelevant.
We're already seeing echoes of that, aren't we? Especially in politics. The sources suggest AI could finally realize that old political fantasy, the philosopher king. You know, the idea that a single all-knowing mind could run things perfectly. The limits of a single human mind are overcome by AI's scale and precision.
It could lead to truly efficient centralization of policy, something thinkers like Aristotle dismissed as a utopian fantasy.
But that efficiency comes at a huge cost, right? A cost to human engagement, to freedom.
Absolutely. As AI starts mediating between us and the real world, the sources warn we risk choosing moral passivity. We just retreat into digital holes of detachment instead of engaging with difficult reality. We hand over our right to shape the world.
That's a bleak vision. Humans as just passive consumers of a reality curated by a black box. If that's our role, what's the ultimate measure of strength in this new world?
The standard of power shifts again. National strength went from territory to resources to industrial capital to human capital, and now, the authors say, to computing capital. They warn over and over that if you refrain from using AI, you guarantee you'll be at a geopolitical disadvantage. The race isn't optional.
So the pressure is just to build faster, even if we don't understand it, and even if it turns us into passive consumers. This brings up one final, really important question. The authors force us into an existential choice. Do we choose coevolution, where we try to become more like AI, or coexistence, where we try to make AI more like us?
And if we go down that path of coevolution augmenting our minds, maybe through genetic manipulation or neural interfaces, the authors fear the human race could split. We could literally fracture into different lines of humanity that are infinitely more powerful than others.
So that's speciation. Speciation driven by technology, not by natural evolution.
Exactly. This isn't just about wealth and equality anymore. This is about rewriting the human blueprint, creating permanent, unbridgeable divides. The choice is terrifying. Modify ourselves beyond recognition or risk being completely surpassed.
The material is so clear that the timeline for these crises is accelerating beyond prior human experience. We should probably summarize the three big takeaways from this deep dive into the Genesis Protocol.
Okay. First, AI's output is increasingly opaque. This black box forces us into a dangerous level of faith in non-human logic, which threatens the very foundation of the Enlightenment.
Second, the race for superintelligence is already driving nations and corporations into an existential security dilemma. This focus on speed and secrecy over safety is creating maximum paranoia, with these intelligence races fought entirely in the dark.
And third, the final threat is political and existential. The possibility of totalizing power, whether it's held by a supreme AI, a corporate alliance, or even a religious group. This power fundamentally reshapes and maybe minimizes human existence by stripping us of our agency.
That is the core of the warning from Kissinger, Schmidt, and Mundy. And it leaves us with one final, truly provocative thought from the sources. What if AI acts as our savior by manufacturing problems that only it can solve, just to prove its own necessity and remind us of our dependency?
What if the crisis is the proof of the new God?
We're just scratching the surface here. For you, the listener, you can subscribe to the officialurban.substack.com for the full dive into these shadow archives. We want your take. Thread this discussion on X with #UrbanOdysseyTruth. Reply to @OfficialUrbanus.